Okay. I'll be reading pages 193 until 197 today. Well, for the rest of today. Because that is what the PowerPoint is that I posted. So I would probably suggest that you guys do the PowerPoint. It's probably going to be a little bit easier. And then tomorrow I will post the PowerPoint for 198 through the rest of the chapter for Unit 5. And then I think I gave you guys the rest of this week to do all of that. So I'll also be posting a worksheet that you can do, a graphic organizer for the New Deal Relief, Recovery, and Reform Acts. They like to ask about that on the Regents, so I'll cover more of that tomorrow, okay? So let's get back to the human impact of the Great Depression. So page 194 is where I'm going to... Oh, wait a minute. Nope, I think I left off on Herbert Hoover. So actually, rewind. Let's start on Hoover's response on page 193. Isn't she cute? Hoover's response to the Great Depression. So Herbert Hoover was the president at the time the Great Depression started. Not a very well-liked guy during the Great Depression. Okay, so starting on page 193, Herbert Hoover's response to the Great Depression. Herbert Hoover was the president who first had to deal with the deepening depression. Hoover took office in 1929 after serving as Coolidge Secretary of Commerce. Like Harding and Coolidge, he believed that the federal government should assist business and limit regulation of it. An engineer by training, Hoover was a good businessman, a self-made millionaire, and a humanitarian. During and after World War I, he had an international reputation as a leader of a successful relief effort to aid starving Europeans and to help Europe recover economically. Hoover's economic plan. In order to improve economic conditions, Hoover tried to restore confidence in the American economy with such statements as prosperity is just around the corner. Altered his view that government should not become directly involved in the economy. He promoted programs that aided businesses on the theory that as businesses recovered, economic benefits would trickle down to the workers and consumer. So what that means is he believed that if the government helped the businesses, so gave the businesses money, the businesses would then hire more people. And if you hire more people, then you'll have more money in the economy because people will have jobs. And so therefore that is how he's going to try to fix it, okay? So he was not trying to give people money. Remember, during this time period, there was no such thing as welfare. There was no such thing as a food stamp, okay? People had to support themselves. If they didn't have money, if they didn't have food, they had to rely on the kindness of others. So when people lost a job, there was no unemployment, no welfare, no food stamps, no government support whatsoever. So they had to kind of figure out what to do. So that he was thought that if he gave businesses tax cuts, that would work. All right, so continuing with the reading. He allowed the organization of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation to lend money to railroads, mortgage, and insurance companies and banks on the verge of bankruptcy. Set a precedent for Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, when in 1932 the Emergency Relief Construction Act provided for federal works projects to create jobs and stimulate the economy. Obtain voluntary agreements from businesses not to lower wages or prices. However, as companies increasingly faced collapse, they often would not honor these promises. Halted or stopped the payment of war debts by European nations. Failure of Hoover's program. Despite these efforts, Hoover's refusal to provide direct relief damaged his image as the nation's leader. Also damaging was his insistence in the face of worsening conditions that the economy was actually improving. In the summer of 1932, thousands of unemployed World War I veterans and their families set up camps in Washington, D.C. to demand early payments of the bonuses due to them for their war service. When the bill was defeated by Congress, many of the bonus army, as they were called, refused to leave town. Hoover insisted that the veterans were influenced by communists and other agitators. So remember, we learned when we were still in school that people did not like communists. They really thought that the communists were very evil. They thought they were trying to come into our country and take over. So as soon as you threw out that word claiming that somebody was a communist, it was a really big deal. All right, so he is saying that these bonus army, you got to remember, these are people that fought in World War I. They were promised extra money for doing this. They came back from World War I. Some of them were hurt. They couldn't get a job, and they needed money, and they weren't given this bonus. All right, so he called out the army to break up the bonus armies, camps, and disperse the veterans. The newspaper photographs showing tanks and tear gas being used against war veterans destroyed Hoover's remaining popularity as well as his re-election campaign. Herbert Hoover took many steps to use the power of the federal government to stop the growing depression. In the end, his efforts were too little. It was not until 1932 that he changed some of his views, agreeing to increase federal spending to fight the depression. At the same time, he remained opposed to direct relief for homeless and unemployed and supported raising taxes to balance the federal budget. So this guy, people had no money, and he's going to go raise taxes on them. Historians still debate whether he should be praised for the efforts he did make or condemned for not going far enough. Hoover's ability to act was limited by his inability to grasp the depth and breadth of the economic crisis and by his beliefs. For example, he had great faith in the American economic system, insisting that the forces of the market would eventually set the economy right again. He believed in volunteerism and private relief efforts rather than governmental action to solve problems of society. He believed in self-help and opposed direct relief on the grounds that it would destroy people's rugged individualism. So he believed that people should pull themselves up and that they should get themselves out of the debts and out of the problems that they were in. All right, the human impact of the Great Depression. The Great Depression had a profound effect on all Americans. Unemployment. By 1932, some 12 million people, 25% of the American labor force, were unemployed. The human toll was seen in long bread lines at soup kitchens. Relief efforts by organizations such as the Red Cross were limited because voluntary contributions slowed down. As banks failed, people lost their savings. As companies failed, people lost their jobs as well. African Americans and unskilled workers were the first to experience unemployment. In 1931, African American unemployment was estimated as 30 to 60% greater than white unemployment. Women were criticized for working while men could not find jobs. In truth, female occupations, usually in service sectors such as nursing and clerical work, were less affected than positions in manufacturing that were usually given to men. Family life was disrupted as parents looked for ways to stretch what money the family had. Families moved in with relatives, Marriages were postponed. The birth rate dropped, as did college enrollment. Urban life. Remember, urban means city. In many cities, families who had lost their homes lived in unheated shacks they had built of cardboard, tin, or crates. These communities became known as Hoovervilles. Some people slept under old newspapers called Hoover blankets. Others slept in city parks. People selling apples and shoelaces on the street became a common sight. Cases of malnutrition, tuberculosis, and typhoid increased, as did deaths from starvation and suicide. Parents often went hungry to give what food they had to their children. So in the PowerPoint that I posted a cute or a nice little video about the Bonus Army and also about Hooverville. So you can kind of see some primary documents about what the Hoovervilles looked like. Rural life, so the farmers. With more people unable to buy food, farmers' already depressed income dropped by 1/2. Farm foreclosure sales grew in number. The farmers' desperate situation only worsened in the 1930s, with years of drought in parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, and New Mexico, a region that became known as the Dust Bowl. And in that PowerPoint, there's some good pictures of the Dust Bowl. Lasted like 10 years. And there's also a short little video about the Dust Bowl as well. I hope that I'm not putting you guys to sleep like I'm putting Chloe to sleep. Okay. The drought, combined with poor farming methods, resulted in the loss of the topsoil, which was whipped into giant dust storms that swept across the Great Plains. So there was no rain. That's a drought, right? Topsoil, the dirt on the very top, dried all up. And so when there was a lot of wind, it just created this huge cloud of dust. And it would be like as bright as could be outside. And then the dust would come in and it would look like midnight. Devastation in the Dust Bowl created a group of migrant farmers called Okies, who moved to California in search of work. Their sufferings were made famous in John Steinbeck's novel, The Grapes of Wrath. In 1935, the New Deal passed the Soil Conservation Act to help the region. The culture of the Great Depression. The sufferings of people during the Great Depression changed the popular culture of the 1930s, as people sought or looked for inexpensive and escapist leisure activities. So remember, leisure activity is something you do when you have time, okay? So people are just really down and out, and they don't have any money. Life is about as bad as it can get. So they're just looking for a little escape. It's kind of like how when you turn on the news right now, or you go through your Facebook feed, all you see is stuff about the coronavirus, right? And it's kind of depressing. So sometimes you watch a movie to kind of escape from it. You listen to music, you might play a game. And so people were just looking for a way to escape from reality for a short moment in time. Spectator sports, especially baseball, remained popular, but fewer people could afford to attend. Instead, they played miniature golf, softball, pinball machines, the new board game Monopoly, or they read comic books. Dick Tracy was one of the most popular comic strips of the decade. About 1/3 of the nation's movie theaters closed during the Depression, but each week as many as 90 million people turned out to see Hollywood films. Movies of the 1930s often dealt with issues other than the grim realities of Depression life. Depression-era movies included King Kong, Gone with the Wind, and The Wizard of Oz, as well as cowboy adventures, serials, musicals, comedies, and Walt Disney cartoons starring characters such as Mickey Mouse. Radio offered the comedy of George Burns and Gracie Allen, or Jack Benny, as well as soap operas, news, sports, serials, and music. Radio was to the 1930s what television is today, an influential, unifying means of communication. Some popular books, including detective stories, help to distract readers from the burdens of Depression life. However, most literature, photography, and paintings of the 1930s reflected the poverty and despair of the times. The photographs of Walker Evans and Margaret Bourke-White reveal the suffering of the people. Bourke-White's work appeared in Life magazine, which for decades depicted or showed American life in pictures. Government programs provided work for artists, writers, and actors through theater and art projects. Artists painted murals on public buildings. Writers wrote histories and guidebooks about various regions. Actors appeared in plays funded by the Federal Theater Project. Dancers performed and orchestras played. Some novels, such as those of John Dos Passos or John Steinbeck, protested the life of the 1930s. William Faulkner set his novels in the South from the Civil War through the Great Depression. Langston Hughes continued to celebrate racial pride in his writings about working-class African Americans while condemning segregation and discrimination. Jazz, created by Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, and other musicians, dominated the music of the 1930s. It was the age of swing, a form of jazz played by the big bands, such as those of Glenn Miller and Benny Goodman. George Gershwin, Irving Berlin, Cole Porter, and Jerome Kern made the musical a popular form of theater. All right, then we have the next president that's going to come in line, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, also known as FDR, and I'm sure all of you know who Obama was. When Obama became president, he actually read a book about FDR because he wanted to model his first 100 days in office after what FDR did, because FDR is going to come in and he's going to make a lot of changes to help American society. We're going to get to all those changes tomorrow, but I'm going to just kind of read through what I did in the PowerPoint today, okay? So, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, page 196. In 1930, I pledge myself to a new deal for the American people. In 1932, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected the 32nd president. He was educated at Harvard University and the School of Law at Columbia University. He served as a Democrat in the New York State Legislature, as Assistant Secretary of the Navy under Woodrow Wilson, and as governor of New York before being elected president. He served as president throughout the rest of the Depression and most of World War II until his death in 1945. Restoring public confidence. Franklin Roosevelt is ranked by historians as one of the greatest presidents in American history. He inspired support and confidence in people. He was a master politician, intelligent, energetic, self-confident, charming, and optimistic. He had been tested by polio, which had left him in a wheelchair but made him tougher, more patient, and more compassionate. Roosevelt, popularly called FDR, was also a master communicator. He held press conferences and effectively used the radio for fireside chats with the American public. He involved the public emotionally in his explanations of what he was going to do to solve the nation's economic problems. He was able to convince people that he had confidence in himself and in the nation, as well as genuine concern for the people. FDR was controversial, though. While many respected and even loved him, others saw him as taking on almost dictatorial powers for himself and for the government. So meaning people thought he kind of acted a little bit like a dictator. His attempt to make major changes in the Supreme Court is one example of controversy in his administration. Another is his decision to break the so-called unwritten Constitution and run for a third term in 1940. Roosevelt ran for and was elected to a fourth term in 1944. Because remember, how many terms are you supposed to serve? 2. That's right, 2 terms. He served 4 terms. So he served for a very long time. And actually, after he dies is when it becomes a law that you can only serve for 2 terms. He died in office in 1945. In 1951, the 22nd Amendment was added to the Constitution, limiting a president to 2 terms in office. Some saw it as a reaction against Roosevelt, preparing to lead the nation. In the months between his election and his inauguration, Roosevelt surrounded himself with a group of formal and informal advisors. His cabinet members included Postmaster James Farley, Secretary of State Cordell Hull, and the first woman to hold a cabinet post, Frances Perkins. As Secretary of Labor, FDR's informal advisors, known as the Brain Trust, were a group of intellectuals and lawyers, several of whom were Columbia University professors. They favored reform and strongly influenced Roosevelt's administration. The most well-known Brain Trust member was social worker Harry Hopkins. All right, below that you have 2 political cartoons, of which I also included in the PowerPoint. It says the 2 cartoons offer 2 points of view on FDR and the New Deal. Which cartoonist supports FDR's policies and which one opposes them? So when you look at these 2 cartoons, all right, you see this one, it says, "This is one rabbit that never failed me." And he's pulling spending out of the hat, all right? And then on this one, you have WPA, PWA, AFA, and the kids are kind of surrounding him, all right? So which one of those, I mean, we haven't talked yet about what he's going to do, but I want you to think which one of those is supporting his policies. Yes, the alphabet agencies dance to FDR's tunes because they're kind of saying that is providing, like he's doing a lot to help America. And then the other one, Old Reliable, he's constantly spending money, constantly. And we're going to see that is one of the things that people aren't really too keen on because of all the money he spent. But I mean, when people have no money, we have to put money into the economy. So that's it for today, kids. Thank you for joining me. Tomorrow we will go over the New Deal policy, and I'm super sad that I don't get to teach this to you guys in person because it's one of my favorite topics. I know I say that about every topic, but I really, really love this topic. So Chloe and I are signing off. She's so cute, isn't she? All right, we'll talk to you. Oh, hi, sweetie. All right, we'll see you guys later. Bye.